This is lecture number DR036LW02. This is the 36th of the Mega Genius lectures and the second of the Lost Wisdom series. It was recorded on 4 November 2010. The title of this lecture is Eliminating the Idiocies. It is 37 minutes long. Copyright 2010 by Mega Genius. All rights reserved. This lecture is protected by internationally valid copyright. It may not, in whole or in part, be duplicated, transmitted, or otherwise reproduced without the express permission of Mega Genius. Unauthorized translation, importation, or distribution is a violation of applicable laws. Mega Genius is a United States federally registered trademark and service mark. And now, here is Mega Genius.
Now let's begin addressing the 10 idiocies which can interfere with a person's ability to apply the genius formula effectively. Each idiocy will not necessarily induce you to think like an idiot, but it has that capability, each of them. Think of them like the points that need checking during an automobile tune-up to ensure that the engine is running efficiently. For example, installing new spark plugs may not be a necessity, but you will pay the price if you neglect doing it. Now, let's address the first idiocy right now. Did you know that mammalian bodies normally live about 6 times the period of their growth? Did you know that humankind lives only about 3.3 times the period of its growth? That is worth investigating. The genius formula reveals that a major reason for this deviation is the diet of human beings. I have not studied this matter thoroughly to determine just what Homo sapiens' diet should be, but proper nutrition is important. I can tell you that much misinformation is circulating today about what is or is not a proper diet for a human being. I remember years ago when professional nutritionists insisted that a healthy breakfast include eggs, bacon or sausage, fried potatoes, toast with butter, and whole milk. They didn't know what a proper breakfast was then, and they don't know now. But that doesn't keep them from continuing to insist that they know what is best, just as they did before. Here is the kind of irrationality that occurs continually. The human body needs vitamin D for the regulation of calcium and phosphate in the bloodstream. Very few foods in nature contain vitamin D in any appreciable amount, other than fish liver oils, fish flesh, and mushrooms that have been exposed to ultraviolet light. Nowadays, milk is commonly fortified with vitamin D, but many people have been taught to avoid milk and would never receive enough vitamin D if it were not for the fact that vitamin D can be produced by the human body when it is exposed to ultraviolet rays. The human body does not need much exposure. In some places on this planet, it is easy to get too much exposure, such as in the southern parts of Chile and Argentina, and in New Zealand, Australia, and South Africa. People in those countries and in many other parts of the world have been taught to minimize their exposure to sunlight or to religiously wear sunscreen with a high sun protection factor to avoid sun cancer. Yet many sunscreens do not block UVA radiation, which can increase the rate of skin cancer known as melanoma. They don't get sunburned, you see, because UVA rays do not result in sunburn, so they think that they are safe. But they may be getting enough UVA rays to cause skin cancer. Furthermore, in places like Australia, many people were taught so effectively by their government to consistently slather on the sunscreen that it blocked so many UVB rays that many Australians were found to have become deficient in vitamin D. Coincidentally, did you know that rates of multiple sclerosis are increasing the farther away one lives from the equator? Why is that of interest? Because that disease's symptoms often respond exceedingly well to vitamin D, which is often found to be nearly absent in people diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Has the pendulum swung too far in our modern attempt to avoid ultraviolet rays? There are many examples of yesterday's medical solutions becoming today's medical problems. Some people believe that it is wrong to eat this food or that one for religious reasons. Their considerations are their business. Others, such as vegetarians, might say that it is ethical to eat plant life but not animal life, which invites the question, is it okay for animals to be eaten by animals and plants? They are eaten by them, you know. For instance, anacondas will invariably choose rodents over asparagus, and Venus flytraps eat flies, which are small animals. Now, if we consider that it is not okay for animals to be eaten by animals and plants, then we have a dispute with evolution, or Mother Nature, or intelligent design, if not God. If we consider that it is okay for some animals to be eaten by animals and plants, then where do we draw the line that determines which species of animals may be consumed and which species may not? And if we consider that it is okay for animals to be eaten by animals and plants, but that it is not okay for humans to consume them, then the question is merely, who is permitted to do the eating? Regardless, those are questions that beg for answers, but I have no bone to pick with vegetarians. Sorry about that. Now, having raised, tamed, and trained Amazonian and African parrots for many years, I know that they do not maintain their health when they are fed only seed mixtures packaged specifically for parrots, and that they tend to be much healthier, have more brightly colored feathers, are more willing to reproduce, and live far longer when they are fed a more rounded diet, such as small amounts of most of the wholesome foods that you should be eating. They should not, however, be fed chocolate or avocado, as those two substances are toxic to birds. What I find particularly interesting, though, is that celery leaves should also never be fed to parrots. There is no problem with celery stalks, but lead accumulates in celery leaves, and when fed to parrots can result in brain damage. You don't want to consume lead either, yet many nutritionists and chefs include celery leaves in recipes for humans. Well, they can include celery leaves in recipes for themselves, but I prefer to make my own salads, thank you. Nevertheless, if you do not have sufficient nourishment without being overweight, not only will your life seem to go wrong, but you will also process information less easily, which interferes with the application of the Genius formula. By sufficient nutrition, I mean reasonable portions of nourishing foods, including fruits and vegetables, as well as green leafy vegetables other than celery leaves, at reasonable times daily. Personally, I do not take any particular vitamin combinations under normal circumstances, just a standard multivitamin, multi-mineral capsule. It is easy for one to become deficient in the vitamin thiamine, also called vitamin B1, which is necessary for mental acuity. In addition, coffee and tea can easily deplete it from the body, as will betel nuts, which I doubt that you chew unless you live in the tropical Pacific or Asia or East Africa, and alcohol will burn up vitamin B1 at an astounding rate. The high that one experiences from alcohol is actually the super fast burning up of the body's reserve of B1, which is an act that is not conducive to mental acuity. B1 does not store well in the body. Some of the best natural sources of that vitamin, although these foods provide it only in small amounts, are yeast, oatmeal, brown rice, whole grain flour from either rye or wheat, peas, asparagus, kale, cauliflower, potatoes, oranges, pork, cured ham, liver, either beef or pork, and eggs. It is undoubtedly wise to ensure that your body has sufficient water, which promotes healthy muscle, bone, and blood, but there seems to be no basis for the oft-quoted rule that you should necessarily drink 8-ounce glasses of water each day. I never fail to be amused by where my research into authoritative rules takes me. Apparently, the 8 glasses of water rule is an extrapolation based upon a 1933 study of rodent hydration. The conclusion was that a person-sized rat would probably require 84.5 ounces of water a day, less some 20% that the rat would get from chocolate mousse or whatever other moist foods the varmint would be consuming, leaving some 64 ounces of water that it should drink each day. They considered that you and a rat of equal weight are pretty much one and the same. Actually, you need whatever amount of water your body needs to feel sufficiently hydrated, given its size, activity, diet, and so forth. If you are about to engage in heavy exercise, you probably should drink extra water. Otherwise, when you need water, you will know if you pay attention to what your body tells you. While I have not yet studied what all Homo sapiens' total diet should include, I can tell you something that it should not. First, let's talk about carbohydrates, which can be a complex subject. I'm going to keep it simple. When we talk about food, the word carbohydrate refers to something rich in starch, like bread, pasta, rice, corn, potatoes, or cereals, or it can mean something sugary like pie, cake, or candy. Some carbohydrates can be good for your body, and some not so good, but your body will try to break all carbohydrates down into single sugar molecules, which are small enough to cross into your bloodstream. Now let's talk about proteins, which incidentally are made up of amino acids. Proteins are substances that are part of every cell in your body. Your body uses proteins to make enzymes and hormones and to build muscles, bones, blood, cartilage, and skin, and to repair tissues. Protein is found in eggs, meat, fish, nuts, milk, cheese, whole grains, and many other foods. It is extremely important that your body efficiently digest proteins. You digest proteins with hydrochloric acid in your stomach. When you dump straight sugar into your acidic stomach, your stomach becomes alkaline, which is the opposite of acidic, at which time it cannot properly digest protein. If it cannot, over time you will become malnourished. What is important to know is that the Genius formula reveals that straight sugar is antipathetic to a person's health. Its continual use gradually makes one's body unhealthy, specifically predisposing it to such unwanted conditions as excess weight, heart disease, colorectal cancer, ovulatory infertility, macular degeneration, type 2 diabetes, and constricted blood vessels leading to high blood pressure, to name only a few. Incidentally, I would estimate that although type 2 diabetes is increasing at an alarming rate, 90% of the cases could be prevented through a combination of exercise and the elimination of straight sugar consumption. One can become addicted to straight sugar. Many people are. But if such a person eliminated from his diet such items as jam, fudge, soft drinks, candy bars, puddings, and spoonfuls of sugar on his cereal and in his tea and coffee, and if he made sure that he consumed reasonable amounts of protein, in a couple of months or so, he would have more energy and his body would act much healthier because it would be. Now, it isn't my intention at any time in these Mega Genius lectures to practice medicine or to tell you what you should or should not be doing. That is your decision. Besides, I once spotted 5 Belgian cardiologists all seated at the same table in a Maui restaurant, each eating a huge slice of macadamia nut cream pie. Since I knew all of them on a first-name basis, I immediately walked up and asked, "Now let me get this straight. You fellows are all cardiologists." They laughed loudly, and one retorted, well, we're on vacation." So, you see, I'm not saying that you should never eat a single candy bar or dessert. In fact, I imagine that it would be relatively harmless if you did it merely once in a while, such as the next time that you are dining on the island of Maui. Your ability to think intelligently will be challenged by insufficient nutrition. The second idiocy that can interfere with your ability to apply the genius formula effectively is insufficient sleep. Unless you have sufficient sleep, and most people do not, you will process information less easily, and life will not seem to go as right as it should. What is sufficient sleep for one person is not necessarily sufficient for another. You do not necessarily need 9 hours, or 8 or 7. You need whatever sleep you require to feel sufficiently rested. Your ability to think intelligently will be challenged by insufficient sleep. The third idiocy that can interfere with your ability to apply the genius formula effectively is inactivity and collapsed space. Regular exercise of any safe kind or other manual work can be beneficial. It has a propensity to minimize many undesirable effects of your truth distortion lens, which I spoke of in Level 3, the Whole Truth series. Another equally helpful activity is to occasionally take a long walk through nature, where you are unconfined and able to extrovert and extend the space that you consider is yours. You will view things less intelligently from the inside of a closed shed than from the top of a mountain. Incidentally, physical injury, pain, or illness will also result in a collapse of your space. Your ability to think intelligently will be challenged by insufficient exercise and space. The fourth idiocy that can interfere with your ability to apply the genius formula effectively is drugs. They can interfere greatly, not only with your concentration and ability to process information easily, but with your ability to sleep and with your endurance and energy level. As I said in Level 2, the Uncommon Sense series of the Mega Genius lectures, all drugs have unrecognized and undesirable side effects. Even a relatively simple drug like Procaine, sold as Novocaine, which appears to wear off in just a few hours and clear the body soon thereafter, actually is stored to some degree within the fatty tissues of the body, where it resides indefinitely, resulting in decreased reaction time and impaired thought processing. You can imagine what many drugs can cumulatively do taken over a lengthy period. Incidentally, I could easily, and I believe convincingly, argue that an attempt is underway to conquer the United States of America by inducing everyone in that country to be dependent upon at least one mood-altering drug. Considerable progress has already been made toward that objective. Again, I am not giving you medical advice. I am not suggesting which medicines you should or should not take. That is entirely between you and your physician. I am merely suggesting that it may not be in your best interest to take any drug that you and your physician determine is unnecessary. Personally, I customarily listen to suggestions of physicians, but then make my own decisions about my health. For example, my personal physician 15 years ago was a highly respected graduate of the University of Southern California School of Medicine, a designated medical examiner for the Federal Aviation Administration, and a national judo champion who had practiced medicine for 22 years. His area of primary expertise was the body. Mine was intelligence. One day, as he was giving me an annual physical in his office, he strongly urged me to begin taking a low dose of aspirin every day due to my body's age, even though I had no strong risk factor for stroke, heart attack, or cancer. I respectfully declined, explaining to him that I was certain that aspirin interferes with creativity, decreases reaction time, acts as a depressant, results in an electrolyte imbalance and fatigue, and depletes the body of certain B vitamins. I added that I would never subscribe to continually taking any drug that was not a necessity, adding as an aside that I was certain that some of the most injurious drugs were those of a psychiatric nature. His only reply was, "Well, I can certainly understand that." What he didn't mention was that he was already taking a psychiatric drug for depression. A couple of weeks later, as I was dining in a restaurant, I happened to notice my physician walking toward the exit. Rubbing my calf, I exclaimed, "Oh, doctor, I have this pain." He shouted back, "I have a sharp one too," pointing straight at the back of his neck, and we both laughed loudly as he disappeared out the door. The update is that just a few days later, my physician committed suicide. And 15 years later, without 15 years of aspirin, my health is still perfect. I have frequently consulted with the medical profession. Some of the advice that I have received has been superior, and some has been atrocious. I have also seen friends healed almost miraculously by physicians, and others so over-medicated by them that they literally did not know what year it was, where they lived, or their own names. With all due respect for the medical profession, I make the final decisions regarding my own body. As a physician suggested to me recently, quote, "Always remember, we practice medicine. We practice it," unquote. On a related point, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, known as the DSM, published by the American Psychiatric Association, is the global diagnostic Bible for the field of mental health medicine. The last revision to the DSM, called DSM-4, included broader diagnoses for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, called ADHD, childhood bipolar disorders, which used to be called manic depression, and autism, which resulted in fake epidemics of these conditions, mostly in the United States, which in turn resulted in stupendous sales of the drugs Ritalin, Adderall, and Vyvanse to the tune of some $5 billion annually. Now, just to give you some idea of the increase in psychiatric drug sales that I'm talking about, let's forget adults and only consider children less than 19 years of age. From 1994 to it was from 1994 to 2003, the number of times children went to the doctor and were diagnosed with or treated for bipolar disorder increased 40 times, from an estimated 20,000 visits in 1994 to 800,000 in 2003. Of course, that astounding jump coincided with increased sales of antipsychotic drugs, which brought in a tremendous amount of money. And these figures are only in reference to children. In brief, such broader diagnoses are so wildly profitable that any fifth-rate would-be psychic with a rag wrapped around her head could predict that the next revision of the DSM will similarly broaden other such diagnoses. It's what brings in the money. Do you believe me? Well, guess what? A new edition of the manual, DSM-5, is being readied for publication in May of 2013, and already there are indications that it may include diagnoses for such, quote, disorders, unquote, as temper dysregulation, psychosis risk syndrome, binge eating, mild anxiety depression, and that mental disorder that has plagued humanity since the first baby was born, toddler tantrums. A disorder? Toddler tantrums? How many perfectly healthy people, many of them children, do you think will soon be told that they are ill, having been diagnosed with new mental disorders and instructed that they need to, quote, treat, unquote, their condition with more drugs that have dangerous side effects? If you are following the money, you know that it will be at least in the billions. Incidentally, how long do you think it will be before no one is classed as normal anymore? According to articles that have already been published in the Journal of Mental Health, that time is arriving now. Your ability to think intelligently will be challenged by ingesting unnecessary drugs. The fifth idiocy that can interfere with your ability to apply the genius formula effectively is other chemicals. You should be careful about coming in skin contact with any substances that a reasonable person might suspect are antipathetic to the human body, or that you might suspect would not be in your best interest to consume, such as excessive alcohol or street drugs, insecticides, pesticides, herbicides, strong fumes, abrasive chemicals, solvents, and so forth. The cumulative effect that they can cause through the skin by osmosis can noticeably decrease your mental ability to process information quickly and accurately. Your ability to think intelligently will be challenged by physical contact with antagonistic chemicals. The sixth idiocy that could interfere with your ability to apply the genius formula effectively is associating closely with troublesome people. This is an underrated idiocy, by which I mean that it is far more harmful than is commonly realized. Associating closely with troublesome people is not conducive to processing information accurately and quickly. I've covered this factor in Mega Genius Intelligence Briefing number 22, Where is the Justice? Look, for example, at the influence Adolf Hitler had on the people of Germany, or look at the popularity of General Tojo among the people of Japan prior to the turning point of World War II at the Battle of Midway. Those are merely two examples of a troublesome person, such as you will discover in your own life from time to time, who was permitted to expand his influence to many others. Even before Hitler was well known, you would not have been wise to have counted him among your associates or relatives, much less your friends. Your ability to think intelligently will be challenged by associating with troublesome people. The seventh idiocy that can interfere with your ability to apply the genius formula effectively is negative or stressful emotions. To apply the genius formula satisfactorily, you need to consistently operate with at least a cheerful attitude. Otherwise, your truth distortion lens will interfere to an unacceptable degree. You need to eliminate any and all factors that will stir up your truth distortion lens and interfere with your objective. You do that by consistently operating at an emotional level above antagonism. Whenever you feel antagonistic or angry or sad, you will not simultaneously be capable of arriving at highly intelligent conclusions. Most people would be wary of taking advice from an I don't care, apathetic person, or from someone sobbing in grief. Yet they may well automatically take advice from someone shouting in anger. They should not. It was a wise person who originated the adage, never trust an angry man. The bottom line is that you should be on your guard when dealing with anyone who is emotionally unpleasant. And if that unpleasant acting person is you, know that your intelligence will be compromised until your attitude has improved. Negative emotions and the genius formula do not mix. Your ability to think intelligently will be challenged by negative or stressful emotions. In fact, these last two factors, associating with troublesome people and failure to effectively handle negative or stressful emotions, are why psychiatrists commit suicide at the astounding rate of twice that of other physicians. The eighth idiocy that can interfere with your ability to apply the genius formula effectively is inadequate ethics. Morals and ethics are different. The word morals pertains to considerations about what is right and wrong. If because you have done something, someone refers to you as being moral, it is because you are considered to have acted rightly. If because you have done something, someone refers to you as being immoral, it is because you are considered to have acted wrongly. Maybe you did what you should have done, and maybe you did not. All that moral behavior is concerned with is considerations that someone has or that some people have. Many things that were considered moral 100 years ago are considered immoral today, and vice versa. Many things. Morals are based upon considerations and are usually enforceable by the current laws of the land. The word ethics pertains to a code of conduct that ensures being kind, helpful, courteous, respectful, honest, trustworthy, and other characteristics that ensure the survival of oneself, his friends, other life forms, and his environment. Ethics is not enforceable. It is a luxury that is affordable only by those with the courage to form and maintain such a code. It is a key component of happiness. You need to form, have, and adhere to an ethical code to which you agree at all times. The inability or unwillingness to do that can be devastating to your health, well-being, and ability to process information easily. Consequently, your ability to think intelligently will be severely challenged if you repeatedly violate your code of ethics. Incidentally, everyone's ethics should include the avoidance of all psychosurgery by psychiatry, such as the slicing apart of brains with lobotomies, the ripping of brains with transorbital leucotomies, also known as ice pick lobotomies, the apple coring of brains with dopectomies, and the frying of brains with electroconvulsive shock, quote, therapy, unquote. Now this brings us to the ninth idiocy that can interfere with your ability to apply the genius formula effectively. I'll give you some wisdom that will sound idiotically simple, but it is worth remembering as it identifies a mistake that most people make time after time. It is this: an intelligent way to avoid making mistakes is to avoid repeating them. I'll illustrate this. What's wrong with this picture? Freddie runs out of cash and needs to find someone to lend him some money. Peggy's boss catches her making unnecessary personal telephone calls on the job. While driving to work, Roger gets a speeding ticket. 2 weeks later, Freddie has an emergency and needs to find someone to lend him more money. Peggy gets reprimanded by her boss for making too many personal telephone calls. Roger gets a citation for reckless operation of a motor vehicle. A week later, Freddie has been arrested for petty theft and needs to find someone to bail him out of jail. Peggy gets a written warning from her boss for allowing personal telephone calls to interfere with her job performance. Roger gets arrested for driving while intoxicated. Do you get the idea? Have you ever locked yourself out of your car? How many times? Have you ever lost valuable information on your computer because you had neglected to back it up? How many times? Have you ever wasted time and energy arguing emotionally over an issue of no real importance? How many times? Allowing a mistake to continually recur is an unintelligent act of omission because you haven't done anything effective to prevent it. Such a recurring mistake is called a bad habit. How many people do you know whose lives are in poor condition because they eat too much, or waste their money, or take illegal drugs, or are alcoholic, or take unnecessary risks, or don't exercise, or are dishonest, or whose lives are in poor condition because of other bad habits? Bad habits wreck people's lives. Don't adopt the bad habit of allowing a mistake to continually recur because you haven't done anything effective to prevent it from recurring. Whenever you make a mistake, take some effective action to prevent the matter from recurring. Again, an intelligent way to avoid making mistakes is to avoid repeating them. Your ability to think intelligently will be challenged by allowing yourself to make the same mistakes over and over. Now, in the next lecture, I will tell you the 10th idiocy that can interfere with your ability to apply the genius formula effectively. It is vitally important to know what it is, since it is a particularly challenging obstacle to intelligent thought. Just understanding what it is and how it works can be extremely beneficial to you. I have named that 10th idiocy bonsai buttons. After that, I will introduce several positive actions that you can take to increase your ability to apply the genius formula effectively, including one that you may find to be a revelation of great magnitude.